What is up, everybody? Welcome into the post-game edition of Shout at Buffalo Bills Football Podcast. One more time for the 2024-25 season. The Bills fall in heartbreaking fashion, Ryan Talbot. Once again, I don't know if this story could get any sadder, to be honest with you. 4 playoff exits for the Buffalo Bills at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs in the last 5 seasons. It happens again, 32-29. So much to get into for this game, but we're brought to you by Topps Friendly Markets.
Yeah, handle your heartbreak with some meat over at Topps Friendly Markets and their Fresh Pick 5 mixer match deal. 5 different options for $24.99. Chicken, pork, beef, and sides, and so much more. Topps' Fresh Pick 5 offerings are perfect for delicious, budget-friendly family meals, and they are available every week at Topps.
I'm coming down with a little something, so apologies in advance. I'll be drinking some water, but we got to get to the plays that define the game for sure. But before we get there, I do want to just start off with a little perspective. And I know it's hard right now. Like, I'm seeing the comments right now. I don't even want to be watching right now. I'm sick. I'm so sad. You know, I totally get that, because you felt like you were never closer to a Super Bowl berth under Sean McDermott and Josh Allen than you were this season. And to see Travis Kelce come out after the game and say that's the toughest Bills team that we faced throughout this entire run, I think makes it even worse in so many different ways. But the expectations for this team coming into the season was a soft reset, potentially losing the division, and they make a run all the way to the AFC title game. And it sucks to lose to this team, but in a lot of ways, the Chiefs have redefined what it means to evolve on the run, redefine yourself every single time. And right now, Patrick Mahomes is as unbeatable as a player in sports really is. And in a team sport like in football, there's really never been anything like what he's been. And I know how hard that is for Bills fans to hear. And there was opportunities for the Bills to win this game. Don't get me wrong. We'll get into those in a minute. But again, sometimes the tip of the cap is worthwhile when what's happening on the other side is we've never seen in football before.
Yeah, and it's fair. And all the points that you raised, Matt, were valid. This was supposed to be a reset year after the Stephon Diggs trade, the dead cap. A lot of people were doubting the Bills' chances in the AFC East this year. Not only do they win the East, they win that division in convincing fashion. They get into the playoffs. They handle the Denver Broncos at home. They get by the Baltimore Ravens, a team that a lot of analysts and media members are picking to defeat the Bills. And they get to this game where you're on the road, you're playing the back-to-back Super Bowl champions, and once again, you find yourself one, with a 1-point lead to start the fourth quarter, and two, within 3 points late in this game, you had every opportunity to win. They proved that this roster can hang, but like you just mentioned, although at the start of the show, you just lost for the 4th time to the Chiefs in the playoffs, and it's why you're watching the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different ending, but you keep saying the same thing in different ways.
So I've seen a lot of stuff in the comments about Sean McDermott. And, the more I think about, first of all, some people are saying fire Sean McDermott. He's not getting fired. So let's start there. That's a little bit of an overreaction to a season where I think that they overachieved and are ahead of schedule in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things to look forward to in the offseason. But I want to talk about something specifically with McDermott that I do think could have been handled a little bit better. And this is the situational football stuff that I think deserves criticism. On the 4th and 5 play, situationally, with how much time is left on the clock, before you even get to the Kincaid drop, right? You're under the 2-minute warning at this point. So if you don't get a field goal or a first or a touchdown, you're giving the ball back to the Kansas City Chiefs with 3 timeouts or not. They're scoring or they're going to get a first down, and you're probably not getting the ball back. On that 4th down play, I think he should have called the timeout. And I know he's called timeouts before and he's been criticized for it. But on a fourth down play like that, you have to be buttoned up completely and have to be ready for what's going on there. And they weren't. They weren't ready for those two defensive backs that came in on a blitz. And Josh Allen was running for his life off of that play. And you just, and we can get to the Dalton Kincaid part. Like, he's got to make that catch. But situationally, operationally, I think you got to be better down the stretch. And those are the kinds of things that make people wonder if the Bills are going to be able to get over the hump with him as the head coach.
Yeah, the situational awareness on that play. I mean, or you should have had an inkling that a blitz was going to come in that moment, and the Bills weren't ready for it. It was a rough game for the offensive line in terms of their pass protection. They'd been great all year, but this was a game where the Chiefs had a lot of success getting after the Bills. Chris Jones was a force. Karlaftis had a really nice game for them. And in that moment, though, two guys come in immediately, and Allen has no chance but to roll back and try to keep that play alive for as long as possible. So, yeah, they weren't ready for what the Chiefs are known for doing in those pivotal moments. So that part of it's frustrating if you're a Bills fan, because you need to be able to counterpunch those plays. And I've seen some analysts say Allen should have thrown it to Shakir on the play in the flat. Allen didn't have time to get it over to him on that side of the field. Allen did everything possible on that play to keep the drive alive with a pass that, watching it live on the television, it looked like he was just throwing up a prayer. But in fact, it was to a wide, I don't want to say wide open, but it was to an open Dalton Kincaid. There was tons of space around him. This is a former first-round pick who needs to just adjust on the football, make a play. We heard all the hype in this draft class, best hands of the tight end position, best hands of a prospect that the Bills had ever graded, and the hands failed him on that play.
Yeah, and it's going to lead into 8 months now of conversation around what the Bills have in Dalton Kincaid and the percentage of snaps that he's on the field. He was dealing with a knee injury. We might learn that it was a little bit more to that down the stretch than that was reported by the team or by Dalton Kincaid. But not an excuse. Kyrie Elam comes into this game for Christian Benford, and he looks terrible. Like, there's issues with some of the draft picks that Brandon Beane has made over the last couple of years, the first-round picks. Now, don't get me wrong. He's built quite an offense. If you look around that offense with Josh Allen as a draft pick, James Cook draft pick, Spencer Brown, Osiris Torrance, like, there are pieces on this offense that Beane deserves credit for. But I do think with Kincaid as a first-round pick and the way that he was kind of regarded coming out in the draft and seeing the success of young tight ends around the league. I mean, you have Sam Laporta in his first year with Detroit. You have Brock Bowers who comes out. Kincaid was the top tight end in his draft class, and it hasn't materialized. And I'm not going to bash the kid for one play in a big time moment. There's a lot of plays that go into this. I thought the Bills got a little bit too conservative in this game. Like, I think if you're Joe Brady, you have to read the room. Number one, the tush push is not working. It's not working in the first half. You got to learn. You got to learn from that and adjust. The Bills did a great job adjusting. For as bad as the defense is looking at this entire picture and the overall picture of this game, I thought that Babbage at least deserves some credit for going in the locker room and finding a way to get some answers against Patrick Mahomes and this offense in the second half. They made some big plays in the third quarter. They gave the Bills the chance to win. Obviously, that drive in the fourth quarter didn't help matters, but I thought the game was hanging in the balance. The Bills were leading at 22-21, and that fourth down failure, although it probably should have been a first down on the QB sneak based on the replay, come up with something different. Try something different.
Right. I mean, real quick with the QB sneak, the NFL just baffles me that they are still going by part-time officials and the marks that they have. First of all, the first official marked it as a first down. The second one comes in, they mark it short. You hear Gene Steratore, Tony Romo, Jim Nantz all saying that should be a first down in the broadcast. He had enough, and they go to review. They don't overturn it. It's a turnover on downs. We live in a day and age where if you watch tennis, they have some technology now that shows you when a ball is in or out. I don't know how you can't microchip a football for these downs and distances and figure out exactly where it was on a given play. We are in 2025 and we are depending on these older, out of shape referees to make these plays where you have two guys that are in different spots on the field saying the ball's in different spots and then they move it back. That's frustrating if you're a Bills fan because he had the first down there. You're up one. You could potentially go up 8 there. You look at the 2-point conversions and the failed 2-point conversions for the Bills, kind of a similar boat to what happened to the Ravens last week and their loss to the Bills. I get why the Bills are chasing points on the first 2-point conversion, the offside penalty on the Chiefs. You get it at the 1.5 yard line, but you fail there. And then that kind of puts you behind all game. Could have been a completely different story if you just kicked the extra points too. So there's all these little things, but you kind of mentioned it. It's the early drafting of this team that worries me a little bit. You mentioned Dalton Kincaid and the drop off from year 1 to year 2. He had a very disappointing second year with the Bills, and he needs to go into this offseason. He really needs to bulk up so he can work on improving as a blocker so he can be out there for more snaps, really make himself someone that you can't take off the field or you have on the field for more snaps than what he's there. You talk about Kaiir Elam, and the Bills have kept him around when there's been injuries, using him in those capacities. But there were plays, Matt, where he was in a different area code than the receivers and tight ends that he was supposed to be covering. And for a guy that was supposed to be so athletic and have all these, the intangible parts of it, I don't know how you get that lost on certain plays. And someone in the comments here, a few Bills fans said, stop trading with the Kansas City Chiefs in the draft. You look at tonight's game, and it's one game. It's a 1 year in their seasons. Xavier Worthy greatly outplayed Keon Coleman, who had 1 catch for 12 yards. Worthy ends up being the leading pass catcher in the game for the Chiefs. They were really trying to get him the ball, I think. He said once again after the game that he had that little chip on the shoulder because the Bills traded that pick to KC. It means they didn't want him, which, again, manufactured outrage if you're Worthy. But, the Bills, they trade down. They get Coleman. They get Dwayne Carter in that trade, who's inactive for the game. They're not getting enough impact from their rookie classes, especially those high picks, enough where that can be the difference in the game as we saw tonight.
I just think it's, we have Sonny Lamont with the super chat here. Defensive-minded coach. His defense was the reason we lost. McDermott needs to go. Thanks for your time. I get the passion, I get the disappointment, and I get the anger about it all because it is year after year. It's the same result year after year. But I mean, if you look across this conference right now, there's really no team that's closer to the Chiefs than the Bills. And I mean, they are really a play or two away from winning this game. And I do think the defensive part of this, Taylor Rapp not playing in this game was a huge miss for the Bills defense. But here's the thing, Ryan. I also think, listen, I've been a defender of Damar Hamlin in a lot of ways. And I think he's played really good football for them for a big chunk of this season. But he's a limited player. He's a limited starter in this league. And what I think you have to be forward thinking if you're Sean McDermott, and who knows, Taylor Rapp goes out in this game. You got to go to Damar Hamlin and Cole Bishop anyway. Maybe you're in the same scenario and the same situation. But what if you play Cole Bishop from the jump with Taylor Rapp, despite the injury in camp? He gets 12 to 14 games of experience, and he's not out of his depths in this spot. I also think, to a degree, this has been the shortcoming with Kaiir Elam. And listen, the Kaiir Elam thing, I'm not blaming it on Sean necessarily, but sometimes the way that they handle some of these young players and the way that they wash out, I thought that the handling of Cody Ford years ago as the first great example of this in terms of a high draft pick was terrible. They drafted him. They didn't have a plan for him. They moved him all over the place. And he was starting down the stretch of the season for Cincinnati, found a home. I'm not saying he's some great player, but it just sometimes the disconnect between the draft plan and the play plan doesn't always meet up where you need it to be for an organization where in a stadium tonight against this Chiefs team, more often than not, those two plans come together between Veach and Andy Reid.
Yeah, it's frustrating when you watch this defense because they made some plays tonight. You mentioned it before. Ed Oliver, split second offside on the first time. Then he rips the ball away from Mahomes to get a fumble recovery. Jordan Phillips had a big sack that led to that field goal late in the game instead of the Chiefs scoring a touchdown, which gave the Bills a chance to win it late in the game. You had a big play by Matt Milano along the sidelines with Patrick Mahomes. Guys stepped up. Some guys made plays. The first two series of the second half, they get stops and forced punts, which was huge. But there was way too many chunk plays. And, I see comments in here about us defending McDermott. He can only do what he can with the players that are on the team at this point in time. And part of that falls on his shoulders, too, in terms of who they had on this roster at the start of the year, but you don't have your starting safety in Taylor Rapp, and Rapp was their best safety by far this season. You lose Christian Benford early with that friendly fire with Hamlin connecting with him, and you knew immediately it was something, another concussion the way that they connected, and very scary moment there. Now you have Kyer Elam. So the back end of this defense was a real issue. Defensive tackle this year, the depth there has been a real issue. You have to bring in Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson after the trade deadline when both players are released by their respective teams, and you're not getting a lot out of Carter. They need an overhaul on the defense, and that's something where McDermott and Bean are going to have to nail a lot of these picks in the draft. They need another cornerback. Rasul Douglas is a free agent. I don't know if you bring him back into the fold here. You need to upgrade the safety room. You need to upgrade the D line. That's a lot of work, but they did still do enough this season to get to this game, to be leading in the fourth quarter at one point, to have a chance to win the game and go to the Super Bowl. So I get the frustration. I understand where it might feel like he might not be able to get the Bills over the threshold, but we've also seen a lot of coaches, Andy Reid especially comes to mind here. It took a long time for him to kind of get to the promised land. And I just don't know if I can put all of this blame solely on McDermott.
All right. John Falsetta over on YouTube. McDermott is the new Marty Schottenheimer. That's been a criticism of him over the last couple of years. I've heard the Schottenheimer line a few times at this point. Justin Tyndale, one of our regulars on YouTube. The game that Joe Brady called to me was horrific. 3:34 to go, 3 timeouts plus 2-minute warning. Run the damn ball with Cook with 6 O-linemen. Had plenty of time. Then he adds with another super chat, how Bean last 3 top picks play. Wondering what's going on emoji, for lack of a better term. So somebody brought this up in the comments, and I asked James Cook in the post-game press conference or in the locker room, if you watch that last play, the Dalton Kincaid heave up play from Josh Allen, Cook's on the sideline. He's not in the game. Ty Johnson's in the game, and I get it. 4th and 5, 3rd and long. You usually put your third down back in the game in those moments. But to me, outside of Josh Allen, James Cook was the best player on the field tonight for the Bills. And in those big time moments, I feel like he's got to be out there. And to me, that's the biggest misstep of Joe Brady in this game is not leaning into James Cook. Now, he did come off at one point. I do want to add to Joe Brady's credit, and I don't know if we don't have the whole details on this. He wasn't listed as an injury, but Cook came off and actually was kneeling down on the sideline at one point. I don't know if the wind got knocked out of him or something. He was out for a few plays. So when you pull yourself out of a game and you're sitting on the sideline for a second, maybe that tells the OC million miles an hour going up in the box, like, oh, James isn't available to me right now. But neither here nor there. You got to get your best players in the game at key moments. I think James Cook needed to be on the field in that moment. He made the biggest play of the game for the Bills offense. That touchdown on 4th down by the goal line, that had a chance to be legendary, hang it in the Louvre, right? Hang it in the Louvre. That was one of those kinds of plays for the Bills offense. And not having Cook out there late really hurt them.
Yeah, I'd argue he was the best player for the Bills tonight, even better than Allen, because Allen came out a little bit antsy, a little bit off the mark, really hurt the team at times, especially early on in that game with those plays. And I get it; he made a ton of great plays, ton of great throws. The touchdown pass in the back of the end zone to Curtis Samuel was outstanding, and other plays there too. But James Cook was great all night long. He just didn't get the touches. So the criticism there on Joe Brady, I think that's valid. For the Bills went away from the run in the first half, where that's been their bread and butter. It's been a strength, and they were just kind of slinging it, throwing it around, making Allen throw a lot of low percentage throws at some points, and you went away from what was working so well, and it proved costly in the end. So definitely frustrating there. You had Matt Collins step up with 3 catches, 73 yards, a touchdown, but obviously some huge grabs. The one before halftime over Trent McDuffie in the end zone, where he also drew a flag, and the other one to set up a 1st and goal downfield for a 32-yard gain, I believe, off the top of my head. You're getting this, who was a journeyman, I guess is the best way of putting it, who came in this year, and he became a quick fan favorite. But he's the one that stepped up for you most at wide receiver. It wasn't Amari Cooper, who had a few grabs, but you trade for him at the deadline. It wasn't your rookie that you took in the 2nd round. And Shakir had his moments too. He was solid, but they also need to figure out a way to keep adding to that wide receiver room, because clearly they need some help there too.
Well, they're going to have to decide if this is a sustainable identity in terms of the tight ends. Like, you're paying Dawson Knox a lot of money. You have Kincaid, who, from an offensive passing perspective, the 2 tight end situation has never really worked out the way that I think they hoped for when they drafted Kincaid.
Yeah.
And listen, I do want to sprinkle in a little bit more positivity here. The Bills have 10 to 11 draft picks, depending on the comp formula, coming up in the draft next season. Remember when the Chiefs reloaded? I think it was the McDuffie draft, shortly after trading Tyreek Hill. They reloaded in a way in the draft that I think really set them up for this secondary run that they've been on over the last couple seasons that might yield 3 Super Bowl titles. I'm not ruling out the Bills, especially with the way that Josh Allen evolved this season. The way that he's playing to sustain this over the next 5 to 6 seasons, I think it's very much doable. There's still a window of time for the Bills, but it's got to get better in the early part of the draft. And this upcoming draft, Ryan, we'll look at the money on the cap and how much the Bills can do in a potential trade for Max Crosby, who I've been kind of pushing for over the last couple of weeks. We'll literally get into all of that in the offseason.
Yeah.
But this draft is critical for Brandon Beane.
Absolutely critical, because you just mentioned how it has helped Kansas City get to these Super Bowls, potentially win 3 straight. You have to hit on those picks. You have to hit on the majority of them. You have to hit early. This is a very deep defensive tackle draft based on what every analyst is saying. That's good news for the Bills, because that's an area they need to improve. Don't know about the strength or depth about the cornerback position, but they have to hit something there too, because you have Benford and then a lot of question marks after that. So there's a lot of work to be done. You're going to be limited in terms of being a big spender in free agency. You might be able to get a few of those, tier 2, tier 3 free agents in-house, but you're not going to be able to break the bank for anyone most likely. And like you said, a trade for a premier player, that could be the other option, where it did feel like Crosby was trying to he said everything. He praised the Bills quite a bit this offseason. And I'm sure that he'd be open to a trade elsewhere too. But for the Bills, it would make a lot of sense if they could get the right price. But then again, there goes a lot of your draft capital.
Listen, it's not the result that Bills fans wanted. And trust me, Ryan and I wanted to go cover a Super Bowl for all of you. Yeah. The excitement around that, even in the press box tonight, was palpable. It felt like a year where they could really do it. Like, they could go to the Super Bowl, potentially win it. I feel the disappointment, the sadness. I mean, this is a tale as old as time, right? Like, this has been the story of this city and this franchise for decades, and it sucks right now for all parties. But I got to tell you, Ryan, I couldn't have envisioned how much fun I was going to have doing this job, doing this show with you. covering Bills football in, what is really a great era of Bills football with Josh Allen at quarterback. And listen, it sucks to be on the losing side of it if you're a Bills fan sitting here, but man, it is cool to cover these just epic games between these two organizations. You just, for Bills fans' sakes, wish they came out on the right end of it one of these times in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you hope they're due for it because, like you said, selfishly, I wanted to cover Super Bowl 100%. I'll be the first to say that, but it hurts more knowing this fan base didn't get to see it, didn't get to see them win tonight, advance to a Super Bowl in a year where the Bills protected the ball extremely well. They won the turnover battle again tonight. They did, all the right things this season where it looked like they were finally going to be able to maybe counter the Chiefs, and it still wasn't enough. It still came up short. They're still seeing the Chiefs celebrate on their field after the game, and you don't want to take these seasons for granted because they've been great years, a lot of wins, a lot of playoff wins at that as well. But it's so tough to get back to these games, and the AFC is stacked compared to the NFC. It's not going to get any easier. While you have Josh Allen, you always think you're going to be in the mix, but we're going to look back on this. We're going to say, man, this one was definitely a wasted opportunity because they had the pieces. They made enough plays where if they just had I can't say they made enough plays if you needed one or two more, but they made plays to put themselves in position to win this game.
And I think Josh really knew it in the locker room at his stall. Like, you could see the despondent short press conference. He was kind of at his stall, like, after everybody was kind of filing out, just kind of head down. The emotional toll of it all, it's a lot. It's a lot. And, not many teams have gotten to this level against this team, and the Bills just kind of continue to come up short. It's tough, but we're going to be back to talk all about what's next, the moves that will need to be made. Stick with Shout, become an insider if you want. If you want to take it out on us in the insider text line, you could do that, 716-528-6727. We'll have thoughts all week long as we kind of move through locker cleanout tomorrow. We'll hear from McDermott and Brandon Bean later this week. And final super chat from Chris D'Amato. McDermott's value is criminally underrated while Beans is critically overstated. This outcome is a referendum on the GM, not the head coach. Dead cap aside. Let's say that for another day. That's a long conversation, Chris. Don't let us forget it. We will get to it next episode. But we did kind of talk about it a little bit, Ryan, at the beginning. I mean, the drafting early in the rounds, I mean, they got to figure that out, especially with 3 picks in the top 90 or in the top 60 coming up in a couple of months. What are they going to do with that? Are they going to kind of get aggressive and maybe go up for a difference maker? Are they going to try to find 3 different pieces? We will see. Take care, buddy. Final thought.
Oh, okay. You said take care.
Yeah, I mean, like, take care. Final thought. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. Stick with us. Like you said, locker clean out tomorrow. We'll have some shows after we hear from Sean McDermott, Brandon Bean. No one wants to be talking about free agency, NFL draft, but that's also going to be on the horizon since this is the end of the road for the Bills this year. So stick with us on Shout and become a Shout Insider.
All right, everybody. Take care. See you soon.